January is here, and that means it's time for Cramuary, where you take your big New Year's resolution-sized goal and accomplish it by cramming it into one super productive month. It is possible. But even if you plan to do your Cramuary goal in a different month this year, you can still be a part of my Cramuary by becoming a patron. I'm expanding upon 24 subjects that don't quite fit into the upcoming Your Creative Push book and offering those pieces of writing to you, my patrons. Not just to hopefully inspire you, but also to get your feedback and direction for upcoming YCP short episodes, the YouTube channel, and further content. Head to yourcreativepush.com/Patreon to support the show and to be a part of the upcoming, much more interactive Patreon experience. And thank you so much for your support. Your Creative Push, episode 320.
The fear basically is a message, and it's telling you that that thing is something that's super important.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Marie-Noëlle Wurm. Marie-Noëlle is a multidisciplinary artist who paints, draws, sculpts, creates puppets, lives at night and loves chocolate, and she comes on today for one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had on this show. She talks about how she got her degrees in biology, English literature and film, and puppet theater, and how one particular class with one particular instructor broke down all of her walls that had been keeping her from drawing and painting. Marie-Noëlle also talks about how literally anything can be a source of inspiration and why we should look at our art as information and our creativity as an experiment. Marie-Noëlle also talks about why she has a particular distaste for the word talent and why a fixed mindset is so detrimental to human beings. She also talks about how she got involved in Skillshare and eventually became a top Skillshare instructor, and how she also deals with her creative fears, blocks, and resistances, and how she gets past them by treating yourself with more compassion and also distracting the self-critical part of her brain with podcasts. And finally, Marie-Noëlle talks about the importance of juicy goals and also predicting potential resistances and writing down solutions beforehand so that you're immediately ready to deal with them. Like I said, this was one of my favorite conversations. It was one of my favorite conversations at the time. It was one of my favorite conversations listening back and editing it. And I am so excited to get this out to you. To really set off 2019 with a bang. We talked about a multitude of topics, and I can't wait for you to be inspired by my guest today, Marie-Noëlle Wurm. Enjoy. Marie-Noëlle, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on. One of my listeners reached out to me and suggested that you would be a great fit for this show, and after checking out your stuff, I definitely agree. So I always like to give my guests the opportunity to kind of share their story to us, sort of how you got to the point you are today, creatively speaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. I mean, it's really sweet of you and to the person that mentioned me.
Shout out Ivanello.
Exactly. I don't know, do you want the short version or the long version? Because
hit us with the long version.
All right. So from the outside, I guess my path could seem quite convoluted because I initially started out studying biology. That's my first degree that I did. I did a bachelor's in biology. And actually really quickly, I realized that I didn't want to be a researcher. And during that time, like one of the things that I really loved about biology was not just like figuring out or discovering how things work, but I was also really fascinated by structures in nature and like how things looked under a microscope, and the classes where we would go out into nature and figure out what plants or insects or reptiles or creatures were out there. And so that whole section is still very alive in the work that I do today. But during my studies in biology, I did realize that I didn't want to become a researcher. And I'd always been interested in art. And I would like spend hours poring over forums of artists and illustrators. But I wouldn't say that I started out being very talented. And well, we might get to that at some point, but I really have an issue with the word talent. I think that it's a huge block to a lot of people's creativity, and myself included. So I wouldn't say that I was extremely talented, but I would draw every once in a while. And most of all, I guess my creativity would express itself in other forms, because there are so many different ways that we can be creative. And in my case, it was more like I would spend hours decorating the walls of my room or the clothes that I would wear, and then the hours that I'd spend poring over other artists and illustrators and hoping that one day I could get there, and totally believing that it was impossible.
Right.
After that, I did another bachelor's, this time in English literature and film. So that was getting a little closer to the kinds of things that I was interested in doing. And to be honest, like, I loved doing that because there's just so much inspiration to be taken from books and films. And I've always been an avid reader. And on the side, I still would every once in a while paint and draw, but I wasn't really convinced that I was any good at that either. Then I happened to move to Montreal, to Canada. There I signed up for an acrylic painting class. And I would say that that class is the one that really changed my trajectory in a profound way, because the teacher that I had, her name is Sandrine Gaudet, and she had this completely different approach to drawing and painting that I'd never encountered in all the multiple classes, either at school or other classes that I'd taken on the side, like life drawing classes that I'd never encountered before. And she really kind of broke down all these walls that I had set up for myself in terms of blocking my own creativity and believing that a bad drawing was a failure, and that thus I was a failure, and thus that I had no talent. And from that point onwards, I really drew and painted a bunch. And then I started participating in little craft fairs, just making art a bigger and bigger part of my life. And then I did actually a puppet theater degree. So like I said, this is a long story, right? But
so we got biology, English and film, and puppet theater. Nice.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, I guess, what I would say is the closest to something artistic that I've studied. But I guess to me, all those things, all those degrees that I did are things that participate and that are the foundation of the artist and illustrator I am today. So to me, they're not disconnected, actually. They're all very, very connected to the work that I do today, even if I never studied art and illustration per se at the university.
Right. I love that kind of visual of, biology. You're like, it's, kind of related, but not. It's like the outer ring of the target, where like the target is, creativity, or like the exact thing that you want to do. Mm-hmm. Even if that center of the target is a big question mark, because you're not sure exactly like how you're going to get there. And then English and film, you're in a closer ring to the target, and then puppet theater, a closer ring. And it's like always getting closer, but it's always still a part of the whole image, the whole target. It always like still finds its way into what you do now.
Right. And I think that's actually a great way of seeing it also, because it means that basically anything can be around that target. So like anything can be a source of inspiration. And I really believe that, like literally anything. So whatever like gets you excited and passionate, that can all become a part of your creativity or your artwork and come through in that way. That's really unique to you, because we all have like unique interests, don't we? I mean, I'm not going to like the exact same set of things that you're going to like. And that's what I think makes the specificity of each person's artistic voice.
I couldn't agree more, yeah. And for you, it seems to be biology and the natural world around you. Mm-hmm. For me, it's outer space. Like I can't shake outer space. Ooh, like no matter what I think about and want to do, it's like always seems to be like universe related.
I can totally relate. I love anything related to outer space as well. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. There's just so much there, right?
I knew there was a reason I wanted you on the show. Well, if we could we go back to that? I'm going to try to say her name the way you said it. Sandrine Gaudet.
She was my mentor and my teacher. So she's Québécois, right? So it's like one of these Québécois French names. Mm-hmm.
So how exactly did she break down those inner walls or inner hurdles that you had?
Well, okay, I think it was twofold. So the class that I took was specifically about acrylic painting techniques. It was just like different ways of using like mediums or textures and just showing how we could explore those. But I would say that from the get-go, she already, a lot of the things I think that I teach now actually in my Skillshare classes are very inspired from things that I learned from her. And I remember she used to talk about a mentor who taught her these things. So to me, that's really kind of special that there's this sort of like, expansion of transmitting these tools and techniques. I think the biggest thing was she would give us a technique and then she would say, go have fun with it, explore it. There was no judgment in terms of, is this a good drawing or a bad drawing? We would often have sessions where we would talk about the art we had just created at the end of the class. And she would often say, like, let's not talk too much about like, oh, this is successful or this isn't successful. Just talk about what it evokes. What do you see in it? And so that was really interesting because, you're in a group session and you realize that everybody has a different vision of the art that you produced. And then sometimes it'll connect and sometimes it won't connect. And so it's a way of gathering information about the artwork that you created. And so in a sense, I think that to me, the way that I integrated that is all art that we create is just a source of information. There's nothing inherently good or bad about it. And if you like it, then that's awesome. But if you fail it, does it really matter? Not really. You can just gather whatever information it is that you have within it. So maybe you need to try something else. Like, what is it that you don't like about it? What is the energy that you thought you were bringing into it that you're not bringing into it? What are the differences between how you're perceiving it and other people are perceiving it? So that kind of thing.
That's such a healthy way of looking at art and your own creations. Did it also help to have like everybody else in class on board with that mentality so that you can kind of have that like no judgment but like judging each other, if that makes sense?
Right. It's a really interesting place. And of course, I mean, you're always going to have some form of judgment in the sense that like, there's always going to be somebody like, oh, I love that one. And then you might notice that they might not say that for some other, work. But there was just this idea that it's more about experimenting. And that's at the root, I think, of how to overcome fear that's linked to creativity, is see it as an experiment. And if you see it as that, then you learn a lot. You really just learn a lot. And then you have fun also. It's like an easier way to reconnect with the playful part of yourself because you're like, oh, well, what happens if I do this plus this? Is this going to work? So, yeah.
No, I like that. It's like such a healthy way of looking at experimentation. And even with that kind of, oh, well, what if I do this? Like, you need to kind of have that kind of goofy, like, all right, like, who cares? Like, let's try it.
Right. And I think we do that a lot as kids, actually. I think that when we're kids, we do that very naturally. If you just watch like 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds drawing, they're not necessarily like that interested in like making it perfect. They're just having fun. I think that's what she taught me, again, is that in order to alleviate that pressure, you really need to be able to reconnect with the fun that it is to create, which can be tough. It can be difficult to do that. But there are ways, like there are tools and techniques that can help you get back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier your kind of distaste for the word talent.
Yes.
I was wondering, could you dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I guess it kind of relates to what we were talking about. One of the reasons that I dislike the word talent is because it has this connection to something that's innate. Either you have it or you don't. What that does is that gives you the impression that if you don't have this sort of innate talent, that you won't ever achieve the things that you aspire to do. That, I think, is a completely flawed perception. The best analogy I have for that is reading. So, like, imagine if somebody said, oh, I'm not really talented at reading. Like, I just, I don't do that. Like, other people do that way better than I do. I mean, it would sound really strange, right? So why do we do that for art, for creativity, for music, for all these forms of self-expression in a sense? Why do we use that word? All those things are also skills, just like reading is a skill. And yes, you might have, and it's very true, some people have an easier time acquiring something in the beginning. For example, as kids, you might be naturally a little bit more sporty than somebody else, or you might naturally be good at drawing, or you might be naturally more inclined to play music in a certain way. But if you stop at that, then it's like you're cutting off the flames of all the things that you might learn if you want to do those things and you don't have that natural ability. So yeah, that's one of the issues that I have with the word talent. Basically because it contributes to a fixed mindset, and there's nothing, I think, more detrimental to us as human beings than a fixed mindset.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that, we talk on the show a lot about this whole, when you're a kid, like we all have this like natural inclination to be creative and to just kind of be messy and not, worry about what the kid next to us is creating. And then at some point there's this terrible thing that happens when we look over and see what they're creating and see that it's a little bit different, and that different is usually in a higher degree. It's like usually better than ours, and then suddenly we look back at ours and we're like, oh crap. so then there's this like gap that forms, and then we get either too afraid or too unconfident that we will never be as good as that other kid, that other person, or B, too lazy to try to fill in that gap. It's like such a bad thing that keeps widening and can definitely hold you back for a long time.
Totally. It's a really weird thing how comparison can be actually so detrimental. But then there are also healthy forms of comparison. So it's like, there's like a lot of middle ground to be found in all of these things, right?
For sure. I was hoping that maybe you could dive a little bit deeper into your actual work and your style and your kind of obsession, I guess, with this like mysterious connection that we all have with the world around us.
Yeah, sure.
Because I love it.
Thanks. It's really sweet of you. So yeah, like what you were saying earlier, I draw a lot of inspiration from the natural world. I think that there's so much beauty that exists around us. And especially in this day and age where, we're running around and we're just getting slammed with images of all sorts and videos and social media and life, like there's so much distraction. I really find that the natural world can be a place to kind of reconnect with yourself and kind of slow down. And so in my artwork, I really try to kind of convey that and create a space where people can just take a moment for themselves and contemplate and ask themselves questions and imagine and reflect and self-reflect. So I think one of the most beautiful gifts that we have as human beings is our capacity for imagination. And there's so much beauty in our minds, and I don't think that we give enough space to those parts of ourselves. And so in my artwork, I kind of try to bridge that gap between the external world, which has, so many amazing things to look at and understand, and then also our inner worlds. and our capacity for imagination and growth and dreaming and transformation. So that's why I often create like drawings or paintings that are, I guess, somewhat mysterious, partially abstract. And it's a way for me to invite the viewer to take that time for themselves and to kind of take that time to see things that they might not have seen, or to access that kind of imaginative, poetic side that I think we all have. And then I would say there's another part of my work that's, how can I say this? So we have so many emotions, right? And human beings have a very strange relationship to their emotions, to the extent where we judge some emotions as being positive and then other emotions as being negative. You know, like sadness or fear or anger. Those are all called, you know, bad or negative emotions. And I don't believe that that's the case. I really don't believe that there's anything negative about them. The reason, though, that we call them negative emotions is because it's very difficult to learn how to manage them or how to deal with them or how to control our reactions, I guess, to these emotions. But they exist, and there's a lot of beauty in them. And so in my artwork, I also try to include the darkness that's inherent in us, but to draw out the beauty or the points of growth and transformation that exist within those darker parts of ourselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it's all part of this mystery that is life. It's something that I always try to meditate on and think about. And I've said this before, but like one of the things that frustrates me the most, is just, why aren't we all staring up at the sky? Like, what? And asking, what are we doing here? What is this? And like, not only is that such a mysterious thing, like just being on this ball that's just in the center of nothing, but also what's going on inside of us, inside of our, you know, our brains are even more interesting, I think, than the cosmos. Just thinking about, I agree, these emotions that are helping to guide us, and they've been around for a while. They're the reason that we're here. These fears, these feelings of happiness or sadness or whatever. It's all these things that are trying to guide us through life so that we can continue to replicate. And that's a mysterious thing as well. So that's why I love your art and what you do. And also, like you said, being abstract and allowing the viewer to figure things out for themselves, and to just have that moment of, I talked about this recently on the podcast, to like invite your viewers to have this like kind of moment where they're taken out of their own bodies, so to speak. So good for you.
Well, thank you. I mean, but I think that that's actually, I mean, I don't know, personally, like the art that I've seen, or the movies or the books that have transformed me the most are those ones, the ones that kind of take you out of yourself and make you ask yourself questions and wonder about, you know, our place in the world, or how to deal with the complexities of living and of feeling. There's so much to learn, and it's really inspiring and enriching when you actually do take that time for yourself, or to create as well. Like, that's why I also love teaching on Skillshare, because I love that there are more and more people who want to take that time to create, because there's so much that you can learn when you're creating yourself.
Absolutely. I think that's the role of an artist, of a creative person, really of anybody, because I think anybody is a creative person, and we all just kind of lose it. But it's to open up these questions, like to say, what are we doing here? Or even if it is just like, what are we doing with politics? Like, what are we doing as a country? Right. What are we doing as a state? What are we doing as a community? Those are very important things that I think artists can, and creative people can really ask the correct questions, if that makes sense, to get people thinking.
Well, I think, yeah, you're touching like on something that is really important, is I think that questions are always going to bring you into an interesting place. Like there's never there's never like a wrong question. And curiosity, I think, is at the root of all creative endeavors, right? So if you cultivate curiosity, then it's only going to bring you to like interesting places that you wouldn't go to if you hadn't, so.
Right. Well, now have you ever, I guess, like posed a question, I guess, with your art, and then been surprised by the interpretation from somebody that's viewed it? Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's amazing. Like that just fascinates me, how you can create something and people will take it anywhere and everywhere. It's awesome. I mean, if that's not a testament to the beauty of the human imagination, I don't know what is. Like, and then sometimes obviously like there will be things that will be a little bit clearer, because I do a lot of things that are semi-abstract or that are more figurative with just a touch of abstraction to it. So in those things, there's a little bit less variability. But when I go to something that's completely abstract and people tell me what they see in it, it can go all sorts of places, and I find that amazing.
I do too.
Yeah, it's super cool. I feel like there's something very childlike about that, and childlike in the good sense of the word, like playful and creative and being in the present moment. Like when somebody tells you what they see in something, then it's like they're letting you into their own little world that you wouldn't necessarily see.
Yes.
And so that's kind of, to me, that's why it's really special. I love hearing what people see in my work.
Yeah, that's like the most special connection you can make, is that not only giving that person the moment to interpret for themselves what you've created, but then getting that feedback and like having that kind of communication where like the loop is closed in a way. There's nothing better.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like to me, art is definitely a conversation. So yeah, hearing also how another person receives it is like closing that loop and finishing the circle. Absolutely.
Well, kind of in the same vein, you've already mentioned Skillshare, and I imagine that there is a great communication that happens between you and your students on Skillshare. Can you talk about, because now you're a top Skillshare, can you talk about a top Skillshare instructor, I should say?
Yeah, we have a name called the Top Teachers. That's the
Ooh.
Da, da, da.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, it's super fun. I really love the platform. I think it's the idea and the philosophies behind it are really wonderful. And so you wanted me to talk more specifically about like what it's like to communicate with the students on Skillshare, or
how you got involved with Skillshare?
Oh, how I got involved. So actually, I kind of started seeing, I think, ads for it on Facebook. And, the idea is that anybody can teach something on Skillshare, which already I think is amazing because we all have things to teach each other. And so I already kind of liked that, and I saw it here and there. And then I got an email actually from somebody who worked at Skillshare and who I think had seen my work on Etsy, if I'm not mistaken. And they told me like, hey, we like your work and we'd be wondering if you'd be interested in teaching a class. And I'd already been considering it. And so the fact that I got this email kind of gave me that final push or motivation to get started. So I'd already been teaching in person at the time. So I kind of already had a little bit of experience teaching, but never online. And so that was a new thing for sure. Like filming myself was kind of a scary thing.
An experience. I've been there.
Yeah. Like people, I don't know. I mean, you must be familiar with it a little bit, like hearing your voice for the first time, right? So it's kind of like that. And yeah, so I went with it anyway, and I did it, and it was really amazing. Like immediately my class kind of filled up a lot. And I think it's also because my first class was called Unleash Your Creativity, 5 Simple Exercises to Draw Without Fear. And the reason that I wanted to do that was because I think that that's one of the most difficult things to do, is to really access your creativity and let yourself be free, and to learn how to deal with the fear that can arise, or the self-doubt. And since that's a journey that I've traveled personally, where I had so much resistance and fear and self-doubt, and I've done that, and I've learned all these techniques, I was like, well, why not teach those? And so since it's something that I think is very common to most people who are interested in creating things, it kind of took off from there. And it's something I'm super passionate about, like the whole, how do you deal with fear? How do you deal with creative blocks? How do you deal with the resistance that you encounter on a day-to-day basis? And you do, even if even as a professional artist now, like I still have days where I have doubt and fear. The thing is, though, that I have all these tools and techniques that help me deal with it now, rather than letting that be the thing that stops me.
And could you get into that? I don't want to have you give away all the secrets of your Skillshare class, but
No,
could you give us some advice for how to get past that fear that definitely creeps into all of our lives?
I mean, the thing is, I think that there are as many tools and techniques as there are people. So what I mean by that is that I think different things will work for different people, but there are a few that I've found that have been super helpful to me, and that I think can be really helpful for others. And so one of them was the thing that I was talking about right in the beginning, reframing things as experiments. That's a huge one, because it means that, even like, let's say you do a terrible drawing, it's just an experiment that tells you, okay, well, maybe there's something in the way, the technique that I did this, that I could do differently next time. So kind of seeing things as experiments or data points, if you will, along your creative journey. That would be one thing. Another thing that I would say is consistency in your creative schedule. So this is one thing actually I talk about in one of my Skillshare classes. Do you know the 10,000 hour rule?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that if you want to become a master at something, it takes 10,000 hours of practice to get to that. And I don't know if it's actually 10,000 hours.
No, I calculated 9,762, actually. That's the point. Right. The bells go off and the confetti comes down.
And you're like, woo, party time! No. Yeah, but there's something that I think is really interesting in that, is that, yes, the more hours that you spend doing something, the better that you'll get. And so, for example, if you do one drawing in the year, or one piece of music, or one video, whatever your form of creativity is, if you do one during the year, then you're going to have so much pressure on that one time. You're like, okay, this is my moment, putting all my creativity in this one moment. It's got to be awesome. And you're already setting yourself up for disaster, basically. Whereas if you're doing something very regularly, let's say you do 500 drawings in a year, then the pressure that you're going to have on each single one is going to be alleviated, because it's only one of 500. So whatever, yesterday's was pretty bad, and then maybe tomorrow's is going to be better. And then maybe the one after that is going to be amazing and you're going to love it. So I think just the more that you do something, then the less pressure that you're already going to experience or have towards yourself in that moment. And then another really important thing, I think, and this comes back also to what we do with negative emotions. Let's say that you're experiencing fear or self-doubt. I mean, there are many phases to that, but at some point you're going to be like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. Like, why am I so afraid of this? This is dumb. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I shouldn't be afraid, or I should just do it. But when you frame it that way, then you're making it worse. You're making this negative thing even more negative. So the way that I like to think about it is kind of like, how would you react if that part of you was a little kid standing next to you telling you that, saying like, oh, I'm really scared that this is going to be a terrible drawing. I think I suck. are you going to tell that little kid or that person, like, that's stupid, you shouldn't think that way? No, what you want to do, or what you hopefully you'd want to do, is give them a hug and be like, yeah, I know it can be really scary. So cultivating self-compassion, that I think is a huge, huge part of how to overcome, self-doubt or fear on a day-to-day basis. So like, rather than shying away from the fear or shying away from the self-doubt, leaning into it and getting closer to it and trying to identify, okay, what is it exactly that you're afraid of? How can I be more compassionate and understanding towards that part of me that's being self-critical? So I think that can be really helpful as well.
Those are all really helpful ones. I
Yeah.
really like the idea of, having all the pressure on that one video. If you do just one video or whatever it is, it's like stacking it all up on this one thing that's going to obviously fall and tumble to the ground. But then if you can kind of spread it out, it's like much, much harder to get all of those things to fall.
Yeah.
But also that's a great way of kind of reframing the way that you communicate with your inner critic or your inner demons or whatever it is. Like if you go back at it with frustration, it's just like, if you want to look at like Republicans versus Democrats, or just like two people that are getting into it at a bar or something like that, it's like the more you yell back at it, like the more chance there is going to be some blood.
Right.
So
that's exactly what it is. Yeah. For sure.
Just kind of being like, hey man, I see what you mean, let me buy you a beer.
Right. Like let's just chill a little, take it easy. Right. And I mean, I guess like a lot of these things like that I was just telling you are things that are more like, I guess, theoretical. But then there are also like little things that you can do that are just like super practical. So for example, I would say like sometimes all those things won't necessarily work. What do you do that can help on those days? Like sometimes I'll just put on a podcast. That's one of my kind of quick fix solutions, because then my critical analytical part is busy listening to the podcast, and then the creative part can actually get to work.
Right.
But that's why I say I think that there are like tons of ways of going about self-doubt and fear, and it's about finding the ways that work best for you. So, experiment with that, right? That's another thing to experiment with.
Yeah, I like to throw on a podcast, or even if I want to still get work done, because sometimes I can get sucked into podcast land where I'm just like, all right, like this is so interesting or whatever. Sometimes I'll throw on a short, like 5-minute motivational video, as corny as that sounds.
No, that's amazing.
Or a song, just put on my headphones, put on a song and force myself to dance or something like that, just to like shake myself into a different mindset just for a second, like get the blood moving, and then calm down, sit down, and go at it again. Try to.
I love it. I'm gonna do the listening to a song and dancing to it. I haven't done that yet. I'm gonna do it. Sounds fun.
And it's kind of very much like what we were just talking about, like a fight at a bar. I was listening to, there's this mentalist from Britain called Darren Brown, and I've been obsessed with him for a while. And he was talking recently on the Joe Rogan Experience about like how mentalism works and how you can kind of just like hypnotize somebody real quick. And he said he used this one time when some guy came up to him trying to clearly just trying to fight the world.
Pick a fight?
Yeah, pick a fight, exactly. And Darren just said to him, I was surprised that in America the fences are only 4 feet tall. Like something completely out there. Something completely obscure. And the guy just stopped. Like, this is not what? Like, it just completely changed his brain.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's like very interesting. Like, anyway, the end of that story is like the guy ended up like crying to him, and they became friends, I think.
Wow,
because you just snapped out of that mental anguish or whatever's going on. But it's the same way, like when you're kind of facing that inner bully or whatever, just do something real quick to switch up your mindset into something positive or something exciting.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That actually reminds me of a podcast episode. I think it was on Radio Lab, maybe, or This American Life. I don't remember. about something similar to that, where like, it's like you do the opposite thing from what you'd expect people to react, like the immediate gut reaction that you might have, but you actually do the opposite. And that how that can completely change the course of an event. So I don't know. I think it was like something about some guy who came up with a gun on this group of people who were having like a barbecue. I was like, oh, give me all your money or something. And then one of them was like, well, hey, do you want a beer and like a burger? And it just completely broke everything. And then he just sat down and ended up leaving and had a beer and a burger and then left without stealing anything.
Wow.
So it's a similar thing
Right.
that you were saying, like the whole basically flipping things on their head, right?
For sure. Yeah. You got to find out what episode that was, because I love both of those podcasts.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I'll try to figure it out. I'll find it for you.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, so I think it's really interesting because like right now we're talking kind of about things that you can do that are kind of the opposite of what you were feeling, kind of like flipping the sandwich onto the other side. It's a stupid analogy, but you know what I mean. And then earlier we were talking about like more leaning into the things, like leaning into the fear or leaning into the self-doubt, like identifying what it is that you're actually afraid of. I think like that to me is fascinating also, that there are so many things like that where two things that are the exact opposite of each other can be absolutely true. And so it's about kind of choosing what is the best thing at that moment. Like at that moment, do you need to completely flip it on a different side, or should you lean into it? And I think that different moments call for different techniques in a sense.
Right. And when you're in that situation, I think it is important, while there are, two completely different schools of thought or two different things that could work, or more than two probably.
Yeah.
There's that third option of, all right, well, I don't want to be faced with this decision. I don't want to have to make a decision of, all right, do I want to watch an inspirational video, or do I want to just do this work anyway? Just lean into it. And there's that third option where it's just like, let me go do nothing, or let me go be sad about the fact that I don't want to do anything.
True. Like there's some days you just have to take a break.
Right. Right. And breaks are definitely important, as long as you're not using that break as a permanent break. As long as you're not using that as an excuse to just abandon ship.
Yes. I couldn't agree more, for sure. And I think, that we often fall into that. But it's important to make that distinction.
For sure. And sometimes we have just trouble figuring out what to do, as far as, we're doing too many commissions, or spending too much time in a different aspect of our life, or what have you. And we need to realize that we need to get back to a certain thing. And in that vein, I was wondering if you could talk about Project Moss Weaver.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah. I guess you did your research.
Well, yeah.
That's sweet. So Project Moss Weaver. So basically it was at, I guess, Christmas last year. So just before January. And over the years, I've kind of experimented with different productivity tools because, I think I need them. And I think because I'm pretty sure I have ADD, like a lot of creatives or like a lot of people.
I do too, I think. Undiagnosed, but
definitely. Okay, yeah. Well, I would definitely, I've never been officially diagnosed, but like, I'm really pretty sure that I have ADD.
Me too, I'm with you.
So before I actually figured this out, anyway, I was like looking into all these different productivity tools. One of them that I found was talking about having a 90-day project. And so it was at the end of Christmas, beginning of January, and I wanted to re-inject more creativity into my life because I realized that even though, art is what I do as a full-time job, I wasn't actually creating art every day or almost every day. It was like really, really sparse because, your time can get caught up with so many other things like admin and emails and accounting and preparing all the prints for your shows, or, there's just a cajillion different things. And so I wanted to get back to creating more regularly. And one of the things that this productivity tool that I was using, and I think it's called the Dream Plan Do Planner. I think that's what it's called. And I found some parts of it super useful, and others I kind of let go, but there were some things that were really amazing. And one thing that it was talking about was juicy goals. So creating goals for yourself where you feel that kind of like, when you're like really excited to do something and you feel that kind of like flutter in your stomach kind of, and you're like, oh yeah, I really want to do that.
Right.
So the idea is to not just create a goal for yourself, but to create a goal that does that makes you feel that. So initially you can brainstorm like different goals that you might have, and then you'll know that it's the right one if it's the one that makes your stomach like flutter and excited.
Nervous farts, I like to call them.
Nervous farts, that works too. I love it. And so adding on to that, I guess I decided that in order to make it even juicier, I wanted to create a name for it and make it something that was visually interesting, because since I'm an artist, the visual really gets me motivated. So after brainstorming with my brother, who's also an artist, well, he's more of a concept artist and illustrator, we came up with this name, Moss Weaver. And what I liked about it was the idea of, moss is something that's really delicate and that grows in a very slow but consistent fashion. And then it creates little worlds that are little tiny worlds that exist in moss. So my goal was to draw 5 days a week, minimum. I put that under the umbrella of Project Moss Weaver, and I created a page in my bullet journal, which is the best thing in the world for getting things done, and changed my life. So I created one page in my bullet journal called Project Moss Weaver, and where I created a kind of a nice picture to go along with it, and where I was tracking if I accomplished my goal for the day. Every day.
And how did you track it?
So I created just like a monthly view, but just with the numbers. So, like let's say January, February, March, and then you have it from 1 to 31. And on each day that I accomplished my moss weave, so moss weave could be anything related to drawing or painting. So it can be either a finished drawing or sketching in my sketchbook or working on a specific thing. Anything that is related to drawing or painting, I would color in that day on my calendar, on that little mini calendar of the month that I created. And so I could visually see how many days of my week I accomplished my goal. And my goal was 5 days a week. And at the end of the month, or at the end of the 3 months, and now at the end of the entire year, because I've kept this entire goal for the entire year, I can look back and see when I've been able to do it and when not. And the fact of seeing it visually is really a big motivator, I find, especially if you're somebody who has ADD.
or
I think that,
especially if you're a visual person, because
right.
you had this Instagram post where you showed it, and it's so inspiring to see like the 3 months just laid out there and then colored in, like, and I know from experience that just being able to check off on a calendar when you've accomplished a certain thing that you've set out to do, to just see all those check marks, or to see things filled in green or whatever, it just leads to that fulfillment that, okay, I accomplished that, like. And it can be a very small thing to put a check mark or to just shade in something. But if every single day that's like that goal to have that sense of accomplishment as you're shading that in, that's another day that's yours, that you accomplish your goals. There's nothing better.
Yeah. It feels really empowering. It's really, really, I think we shouldn't underestimate how powerful that is, for sure. And like, just, it gives you a sense of pride as well. And I mean, in the good way, right? Like, wow, I did this thing that I set out to do. It's really a great way to get your goals accomplished.
Right.
To make it like exciting for yourself, to fill it in. And I've actually, so the Instagram post that you saw was the initial project, which was just 90 days. But yeah, I've continued it the entire year.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
So, like,
It works.
Yeah, it definitely works, I'd say.
Well, good for you. Yeah, and
Mm,
also just having, for people who struggle with accountability, and especially if you don't have like a real life person that you are doing a challenge with or that can keep you
right.
accountable, it's so nice to be able to put it in something on paper, in your journal, in your bullet journal, in your sketchbook, in your whatever, something that's like there on paper that you can't unless you rip it out. It's there
Right.
for good. So knowing that it's
Yep.
kind of there, and if you don't do it, it's gonna just be blank, It's not gonna be
Yep.
colored in. It's gonna be there forever. That can help to keep you accountable.
Totally. Like, I mean, there are all these like different ways of increasing that accountability. And it's really tough for, like you said, when you don't have somebody external doing that. When it's just you and yourself, there can be a lot of, you know, walls that you can build up for yourself to not be, as consistent or whatever, or moving towards your goal. So there are tons of little tricks like that that you can do to bring you on that path. One of the things it said for this 90-day project is also writing down the like challenges that you might encounter.
Mm-hmm.
So like what might happen that might prevent you from actually accomplishing your goal, and then writing those down, and then creating like solutions in advance for what are you going to do when this happens. So like, let's say I'm having a really bad like self-critical day. What are you going to do on that day? Well, then maybe you can do something that's simpler, like a simple exercise, a simple task that doesn't require, as much creativity as like, let's say, creating a finished piece or whatever. Right. So I don't know, writing those down I thought was really helpful as well.
Yeah, having a plan of action in case your house catches on fire. Like
Right.
where's your exit, where's
Exactly.
your whatever, so it's just like a instant kind of escape plan rather than having that standstill moment where you're just like, "Oh man, what do I do? I'm a failure."
Right. Or where it's just like pure chaos and you're like, okay, I'm giving up.
Right, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's tough sometimes to put out into the world challenges like that because it means that beforehand, there was that void or that challenge that you had or that need to do this challenge in order to change some aspect of your life. So I appreciate you opening up with that.
My pleasure. I mean, if it can help somebody, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Mm.
And before we let you go, I was wondering, did you have any resources or any, I don't know, inspirational movies or books or people or YouTube videos that maybe inspire you and could inspire us as well?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things. We were talking about podcasts earlier, and so Radiolab, This American Life are definitely podcasts that I find really inspiring. And there's also, I don't know if you're familiar with David Attenborough's Life series.
So
So
good.
it's like, oh, love that stuff. So good. Anything that has to do with, there's another like National Geographic documentaries. I'm guessing you've seen these like about space and the cosmos, like all those things. Like I just find it mind boggling, the complexity and beauty that exists in the natural world. So anything that revolves around that is just definitely a go-to inspiration. And then in terms of books, I definitely am an avid reader. And there's one author that I really love called Rebecca Solnit. And she wrote a book called The Far Away Nearby, which is a labyrinth of information, personal stories, essays on different thoughts. It's a really particular thing that I've never seen anywhere else. So if that's something that piques your interest, that could be something interesting. I also love Rumi. Do you know Rumi?
No.
He's a Sufi poet from like I don't know what century, 12th century. And his poetry is very simple yet really complex. And there's some really beautiful little gems in there. So I don't know. Those are two books that I find really, really inspiring. And then novels. There's tons of novels. Ruth Ozeki. Have you read A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki?
No.
Oh, so good. I don't know. we shouldn't get started on books because I'm just going to talk for 2 hours.
That's a different podcast. Your creative book.
So, right. But anyway, there's a ton of places to go and find inspiration. So
very cool. Thank you very much for those, and we'll have them all linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/321. Marie-Noëlle, it is time for the final push, and that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and I'm sure there are many, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay, well, I guess if you are listening to the creative push, it means that you want to inject more creativity into your life. And maybe also it means that you have fear about creating something and that you're trying to find ways to keep delving deeper into your own creativity. So I guess one of the things that I'd like to say is that if you have that fear, the fear basically is a message, and it's telling you that that thing is something that's super important. So if you let the fear overpower the desire to do that thing, then you're silencing that part of yourself. And rather than fighting it, lean into it and give it love and compassion and write it down, hug it like you would, kind of like you would if it was a different person telling you that they're afraid of accomplishing this goal. Just give them love and compassion and find techniques that work for you when that voice is so loud that it stops you from creating. There's so many different things that you can experiment with, and find the ones that help you get to that place where you can actually sit down and create. I think that would be my message.
I love it. The fear is a message.
Yes.
Marie-Noëlle, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for giving us that push, for sharing your story. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. And you can find Marie-Noëlle on her website, Marie-NoëlleWurm.com, WURM.com, and on Instagram, Facebook, Patreon. She is Marie-Noëlle Wurm. And we'll have, like I said, everything else linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/320. Marie-Noëlle, thanks again.
Thank you.
Did I not tell you that was going to be awesome? Seriously, huge thank you to Marie-Noëlle Wurm for coming on the show and really reinvigorating my spirit about this podcast, and just so many things I want to talk about. I'm going to limit myself to 3 though, and I'm going to try to blast through them. Number 1, how literally anything can be a source of inspiration, and you should not be embarrassed or shy about the things that pique your interest or inspire you, especially if they embarrass you, or especially if they make you feel kind of awkward, sharing them out because it doesn't really fit into the norm or what you feel is like the norm of what people around you are talking about. Those are the things that you should actually lean into. That's a sign that you're actually on the right path, because those are the things that you can put your own unique spin on. Number 2, this is something I don't really know how to articulate because I haven't quite explored it enough yet, but I think it's very important, and it's the idea of art simply being information. That word, information, it can take a lot of pressure off of you. When you create art, it's just information in your brain that you're getting out there. And yes, it's crucial to you because it is you, it came from you, and it's important to you. But for anybody else that's taking it in, it's just the information that your kind of computer brain was able to putz out the best way that it could. And they are the ones that get the privilege to get those readouts, to see the result. But when you can start looking at your art and your creative output as simply information, it definitely takes some of the pressure off. It's not your thesis statement on life, and it's not the thing that you're going to be judged on when you die. It's simply you getting stuff from your brain out onto paper, out onto the computer, out into music, however you get your art out of you. It's just information, so don't sweat it. And finally, number 3, the more of something that you do, the less pressure there is on you for each individual thing. This should hopefully encourage you to want to create a large quantity of stuff. The faster that you can get that piece of art or that creative thing out of you and create a tangible thing and move on to the next one, the more you'll be able to create in a week, a month, a year, a lifetime. And like Marie-Noëlle said, the more that you create, the less pressure there is on each individual thing because you have a large body of work that you can look at. If one thing's a failure, it's not a big deal because you have many other successes. It's such a simple concept, but I think we forget this all the time. But when you remember that this is the case, it makes it much easier when you're approaching each individual piece to realize that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much because you will always get another chance. On our next episode, we have Lily Hevish. Lily is a professional domino artist who produces weekly videos on her YouTube channel, Hevish5, and she comes on the show next week to talk about how she got involved in domino art, all of the opportunities that have come her way as a result of starting her YouTube channel, and also a look into her creative process. If you want to find out more about Lily or check out some of her domino art, you can head to her website, hevish5.com. That's HEVESH 5, the number, .com. And on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, she is Hevish5. And we'll also have that linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/320. And I will link up to some specific videos that you can check out from Lily, some of the videos that we talk about at length in the episode. But that is all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. I know that you were because I am just thinking about it. So go and get your work done, and we will see you next week if you need that push again. I love you all so much. Go put all that information in your head out there in the world. Create a lot of stuff so that each individual thing doesn't matter as much. See you next week. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.